Hello, I'm Mary Jo, and I'm going to be talking about my perception and understanding of God. Now, for many years, I had a real problem with the word God. It just wasn't a word I used, and certainly not out loud. And I think this is because of childhood associations with it, and also because of other people's perception of what God means to people who talk about belief in God. So I'm going to begin with what God is not for me. And at the most basic level, it's not the little old man sitting up on a cloud who is judgmental and who watches your every word and move, which is the childhood perception. But I'd like to go on. It's also, for me, not the creator of the universe. I don't know what created the universe. And as a Quaker, I can only speak from my own experience, what I've either experienced myself or what I believe really is true, makes sense to me. And when I think of the vastness of the universe and our lack of understanding really where it even ends or where it could possibly have come from, how can I possibly talk about God as a creator in this? I don't believe in a God who is interventionist in either the physical world or the affairs of man. Do you remember when there was a tsunami some years ago and headlines in the newspaper said, "How could God do this to innocent people?" Well, God does not, for me, knock tectonic plates together, nor does he inspire people with the sort of evil that leads to wars and mayhem and massacres. My God does not intervene in the world in that way. Nor is it for me manifest in a human being, a single human being. In other words, I don't believe that Jesus is God or that there is any human being that has been God. And in the same way, it's not a chatty sort of person to whom I can say, "Oh, I'm in trouble today, God, can you help me out?" My God doesn't help me in that way. What it is a very strong force, a very strong force for good and of love within me, which I think has always been there, but it does need for me to be aware of it and to acknowledge it, which I haven't always done, and even now, although I try to, I don't always acknowledge that. Quakers talk about the promptings of love and truth in heart. This little book, Advices and Queries, is the first chapter of this book, a compendium of Quaker faith and belief, which we rewrite every generation, actually, but it's the first chapter of this. And of the Advices and Queries, the first of these is, "Take heed, dear friends, to the promptings of love and truth in your hearts. Trust them as the leadings of God." And for me, that's a good definition of God. I also like the words of the poet Charles Causley, who says, "God who does not dwell on high in the wide, unwinking sky, but whose gentle counsels start simply in the human heart." This, to me, is a very, very meaningful approach to God. So how do I encounter this? Basically, there are several ways. One is the unbidden religious moment. I've had one peak experience of God in my life. I have a feeling that's probably my lot. I think probably you don't get more than one of those in a lifetime, but it was enough to radically change me and to alter my perception of myself, the world, of others, and everything. I get, in addition to the peak experiences, what I call rolling hills experiences, sort of semi there, and those can come on at any time. I remember it happened a few times when I walked down a certain sidewalk on my way to work, and I used to keep going down that sidewalk just hoping, that perhaps that would happen again. But it doesn't happen that way. It does come unbidden. And there are other times just being aware of nature, the universe, and people around me. I don't believe I have any opinions about the creation of the universe, but I certainly can feel manifest of the otherness of the mystical nature by looking at the skies, looking at a grain of sand, looking at a flower, looking at somebody who smiles in a crowd. And that, I think, is an experience of God. And there's something to be said, too, about the discipline of making time for an awareness of God in your life. And I realize this more and more as time goes on. It's important to take time, perhaps before a meal, just to pause and be still and realize the presence of God. It's good in the day to have a definite time that you do this, which just gives up space, it gives room for this awareness to be. And it's also, for me, important to go to meeting for worship. The advices say to go when you're not feeling particularly warm or full of religion, but to go and to be there. And that discipline, too, does give me space in which I can encounter God and in which I can listen more closely to those promptings of love and truth in my heart.